Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're tackling a really key concept in how organizations manage risk, the three lines of defense model.
hmm
You could sort of picture it like a safety net, right? With different layers designed to catch different problems.
Yeah, exactly.
And we're going to focus in, really zero in on that middle layer, the second line of defense. And we're using some great insights here from FinCrime Intelligence.
Yes. And what's really interesting about this second line is its independence. It's not sort of bogged down in the day-to-day running of things,
Right.
which gives it this, unique perspective. It can oversee things and make sure risks are actually being managed properly and that the company is compliant. It's really vital for stability.
Okay. So the plan for this deep dive then is to really get under the skin of this second line. We want to understand, what does it actually do, its responsibilities, and why is it so important?
hmm
Particularly, like you said, for financial crime compliance. And yeah, our info today is coming from the folks at FinCrime Intelligence who really live and breathe this stuff.
They certainly do.
All right, so let's unpack it. This three lines model, where does the second line actually sit? What is it?
Well, it's right there in the middle. Think of the first line as like the operational teams, the people doing the daily business.
Okay, the front line.
Yeah, the front line. Then you got the second line, our focus, and then the third line is internal audit, that final independent check.
Got it.
So the second line is positioned right between them. It's this critical oversight layer. Its main job is really to guide, to monitor, and fundamentally, to make sure that risk management and compliance are, well, effective, working properly.
Right.
They're the ones setting up the risk frameworks, keeping an eye on the controls, and ensuring everyone's sticking to the rules, both internal policies and, external regulations.
Okay, so if the first line is, say, driving the car, the second line is maybe the experienced co-pilot, checking the map, watching the dashboard.
That's a good analogy, yeah. Making sure you stay on track and heed the warnings.
So what does that look like in practice? What are the main sort of day-to-day responsibilities for the second line?
Well, they have quite a few key jobs. One of the big ones is developing policies and frameworks. They're sort of the architects, you could say.
Okay.
Designing those risk and compliance blueprints that the whole organization needs to follow, and making sure those plans actually support the business's overall goals.
Right. Makes sense.
Then there's oversight and monitoring. This is huge. They're constantly checking if the first line, the business units, are actually doing what the plan says. Are they managing risks effectively?
So like quality control for risk management.
Exactly. A continuous assessment. Are the processes working? Are risks being identified and dealt with?
Okay. So they design the rules, check they're being followed. What else?
Regulatory compliance. That's a massive piece. Regulations are complex. They change all the time. The second line needs to understand them, interpret them
And translate them.
precisely, translate them into practical actions the business can actually take. Then there's training and advisory. They need to educate people across the organization, provide guidance on controls, legal duties, compliance standards, make sure everyone knows their part.
So it's not just policing, it's also helping.
Very much so. And finally, independent risk reporting. They create objective reports on the big risks, any incidents, any control weaknesses they've found.
And who sees those reports?
They go straight up to senior management and the board. It gives them that clear, unbiased picture of what's really going on with risk.
Wow. Okay. That is a pretty broad mandate. Now, you mentioned these lines. How do they actually work together? What's the relationship like between the second line and the other two?
Yeah, it's crucial they interact effectively. The second line really is that bridge. With the first line, it's a bit of a dual role.
How so?
Well, they advise and support the operational teams, right? Helping them implement controls, understand the risks.
The helping part?
Yes. But they also have to challenge them. They need to be able to independently verify the first line's risk assessments, question decisions if needed. That's the oversight part.
So a partner, but also a challenger. That sounds like a tricky balance.
It really is. But that tension, that constructive challenge, is where so much of the value comes from. It's not about blame. It's about making things better, preventing problems down the line.
Right. Fostering that improvement culture. Okay, so that's the first line. What about the third line? Internal audit.
With the third line, the relationship is more about providing the basis for their work. The second line produces reports, documents, controls, assesses risks.
And audit uses that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Internal audit often uses the second line's work as a starting point when they come in to do their independent testing, to check if the whole system of risk management and compliance is actually working as intended.
So they rely on the second line's assessments.
To an extent, yes. Collaboration is good for efficiency, But, and this is key, the second line absolutely must maintain its independence from the first line. Otherwise, that oversight isn't truly objective.
Independence. Yeah, that keeps coming up. Okay, let's pivot specifically to financial crime now, since that's the focus of our source, FinCrime Intelligence. How does the second line play a role there?
Oh, it's absolutely central. They are key to making sure financial crime risk management isn't just a policy on a shelf, but is actually, embedded in how the organization operates.
Okay, like how?
Well, take anti-money laundering, AML oversight. The second line is responsible for making sure the business has solid processes for things like customer due diligence CDD.
Knowing your customer.
Right. Verifying who they are. And enhanced due diligence EDD for those higher risk customers. And also making sure suspicious activities get reported properly.
SARS. So they're ensuring the first line isn't just, ticking boxes, but actually doing effective checks and reporting.
Precisely. They oversee the effectiveness of those controls. And then think about fraud risk governance. The second line designs the frameworks to spot fraud, report it, and ideally prevent it, whether it's internal or external. And sanctions monitoring. That's another big one. Sanctions lists change constantly. The second line has to interpret these complex rules and ensure the operations comply, avoiding massive fines or reputational damage.
A huge responsibility.
It is. And lastly, there's conduct risk management, promoting ethical behavior, minimizing the risk of reputational harm from bad conduct. That also falls under their umbrella.
It really sounds like they're the backbone of financial crime defense within the organization, but as you said, this area changes so fast. New tech, new regulations, new criminal tactics. What are the big challenges they face, and how do they stay effective?
You've absolutely hit on the core issue. The landscape is shifting constantly. Technology risk, regulatory changes, the sheer sophistication of financial crime today. It's a lot.
I bet.
So to stay effective, there are a few best practices. First, and maybe most important, is fostering open communication between all three lines.
Makes sense. No silos.
Exactly. Information has to flow. Everyone needs a clear picture of the risks and how the controls are holding up. Second, investing in technology, especially advanced data analytics and monitoring tools.
Right. You need the tools to see the patterns.
You really do. Manual checks just can't catch everything anymore. These tools can spot subtle anomalies, potential breaches. Third, you absolutely need crystal clear role definitions.
Avoid stepping on toes or letting things fall through the cracks.
Precisely. No duplication, no gaps. Everyone knows exactly what they're responsible for. Accountability is key. And finally, you need to cultivate a culture of proactive risk ownership.
Meaning everyone feels responsible.
Yes. The second line sets the framework. But risk management isn't just their job. It has to be part of everyone's mindset, from the top down and across the organization.
Okay, those are really practical points. Open communication, smart tech, clear roles, and that shared culture of responsibility. It definitely sounds like the recipe for a strong second line. So wrapping this part up, it really feels like the second line of defense is just indispensable.
Absolutely. For protecting the organization, especially against financial crime, it's critical.
Yeah.
It gives you that essential independent oversight. It builds the frameworks. It navigates the regulatory maze. It really is that vital link, that bridge in the whole three lines model. Connects operations with that final assurance from audit.
Okay, so here's something to think about as we finish. If you just glance at, say, the Trending Now feed on FinCrime Intelligence, you see stories about huge data leaks from malware like info stealers, AI being used by criminals.
Scary stuff.
Yeah, attacks targeting Apple IDs, worries about biometric data security, those super convincing phone scams, massive fraud happening on platforms like Facebook. The threats are getting incredibly complex,
It's
right?
definitely more sophisticated.
So considering this constantly shifting, really complex landscape of financial crime, how do you think the responsibilities, the challenges for the second line of defense might have to keep evolving to keep up with these kinds of advanced threats?